Welcome to the Edelheit Experience, a compelling conversation about revolutionizing health and well-being, bringing you rich stories and lessons learned from leading corporate executives. Now, we'd like to introduce your host, Jonathan Edelheit.
Welcome to the Edelheit Experience. This is Jonathan Edelheit. I have Rich joining me today. Rich, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan. It's good to be here.
So, Rich, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I always find that a good opening question, but I always feel a little uncomfortable because I'm not used to talking about myself in that way. I'll tell you a little bit about myself as a person because people can Google what's happening in my career. I have a wife and 3 kids and a dog. And we live in Columbia, Maryland, and I spend a lot of time outdoors when I'm not working, and I love to hike. I'd like to camp. This weekend, I'm going to go biking with a buddy of mine, and we're actually going to do a 2-day trip. We're going to bike up in New York State, and we're going to stop at a Airbnb on the first night, and then we'll finish our trip on day 2. So I'm pretty active when I'm not at a computer desk.
That sounds very cool. What type of dog do you have?
We've got a golden doodle, and she is really sweet. She's like a teddy bear. I mean, if you picture what a teddy bear looks like, that's our dog. She's like this golden brown, and she's got this white tuft of fur around her snout.
Is it medium, small, or large golden doodle?
She's medium. She's like 25, 27 pounds.
I have a golden doodle too. He's about 40 pounds. And I would say, yes, big shout out to anyone who has golden doodles or doesn't. It's like a teddy bear ball of joy and happiness all in one.
Yeah, I agree. And it's nice to have that connection with you, Jonathan.
Yes, he's, I would just say it's the happiest dog I've ever had.
And same here, although one caveat, Cammie's the only dog I've ever had.
Ah, do you take her on your bikes? Does she run alongside you like Lassie?
No. I've tried to take her running with me. She's just not interested. She'd rather walk, do a lot of sniffing, and then, do some more walking. She's not quite the outdoor active adventurer as I am.
Got it. I take mine hiking with me if I go in the mountains of North Carolina. So it's fun to watch him run, and he pours his heart into it, runs into rivers and streams. It's good. I love outdoors and hiking too. So we have golden doodles and hiking in common.
Yep. That's nice.
So and Rich, are you're a doctor, right?
I am. That's what the degree says.
There we go. Are you one of those guys that you require everyone to call you doctor? Am I like violating all the norms of society right now?
I did not stop you when you said hi, Rich. No, that's that raises an early story. After I finished medical school, you get your diploma. You're literally a doctor. That's an MD, medical doctor. And I went to do residency training, which almost all new medical school graduates do. And it's the first week, and I'm walking down the hall with my white coat, and I'm hearing doctor, and it's getting louder, and it's getting closer to me. And finally, someone's like, doctor, and I'm like, turned around. I'm like, yeah. She says, why didn't you hear me? Didn't you hear me? Why didn't you turn around? I'm like, I didn't know you were speaking to me. So it took me a while to get used to it, Jonathan. And frankly, I prefer Rich. It's just, feels better.
Now, one thing I just have to throw out there, I know you said people can look at your bio later, but you're running Wellbeing at Johns Hopkins. And the question I asked you this is, I haven't seen many doctors in the role for organizations managing well-being that have that. And I'm curious as to, does that bring a unique perspective into like what you actually do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, first, when I went to medical school, it's not because I thought I was going to be the chief medical director of Wellbeing at Johns Hopkins Medicine. I'm a family physician by training. I thought I was going to be in a suburban practice for 30 years. But, not to give you the whole circuitous path, I did land at Johns Hopkins Medicine, and I've been here for almost 11 years now. And yes, it's really helpful to the organization to have training, whether formal or informal, out of school, in health and well-being and health promotion. And it's also helpful to share a dialogue with the population you serve. And so at Johns Hopkins Medicine, I do believe, it has helped to be a physician, to be in my role, not only because I have obviously an intimate knowledge of health, but also we have 5,000 faculty members. It's a lot of people, and we've been able to collaborate. I've been able to ask my colleagues to help me on different projects to make sure that we're providing the most up-to-date information, and not just the actual facts, but the most up-to-date methods for skill building and helping influence behavior change amongst our workforce, and ways that have proven to be an effective path toward support, and not, unfortunately, what we see elsewhere in some organizations.
And we see elsewhere, is that like, do you think it's just like mud being thrown up against the wall, or just rolling out programs and things that don't work?
Well, I think that, so listen, I've been in the employee health and well-being space for about 25 years now, and in several different organizations, and I've been speaking nationally for much of that time. So I've had a chance to not only read about it, but talk to others and even advise other organizations. And it's pretty commonplace for us to want to help our employees, and the first and easiest way to do that is education. But the problem with that is it really falls short. I mean, Jonathan, most people know an apple a day keeps the doctor away, and most people know that smoking's not good for you. So we really got to get past that. And fortunately, I'd seen a big difference since 25 years ago versus today, but we have a way to go. And so I wouldn't say it's throwing mud against the wall and seeing what sticks. I'd say it's not being fully informed of all the possibilities that exist to support health and well-being in the context of the workplace.
No, I think it's very interesting you say that, because there's not really a lot of places they can go to gather that info, or to gain that intelligence. Now, I would love to learn from your perspective. What is well-being culture?
So Webster's defines culture as the shared behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes of a group of people that has something in common. And so a well-being culture is that shared behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes around our well-being, around our health. And the thing in common for me and my job is all the people who work within Johns Hopkins Medicine. There can be a well-being culture in a community. I'm proud to say that Columbia, Maryland is, or Howard County, Maryland, the county that I live in, is one of the healthiest counties in the country. And we have a well-being culture. And it's this immersive experience that is very different than the workplace wellness that most organizations are have approached.
And when you say it's very different, like, what is that difference? Because I think there will be some people who maybe they just think it's all the same thing. You're calling it, like well-being culture. I call it workplace wellness. Really, what's the difference?
Yeah, that is, before I get to what the difference is, let's talk about this calling things by names. And that is true. Workplace wellness started to take a real public relations hit around 2010. And for several years, just, it's felt like one media story after another, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. In the meantime, there were published articles that showed this company did well on this and that. So what I saw from where I was the wellness industry trying to rebrand itself. And so well-being came up. Instead of wellness, it became well-being. And then take it a step further, we started hearing people use the word well-being culture. In fact, Jonathan, in 2018, the Journal of Occupational and Environmental Medicine, within 1 year, published 3 articles about well-being culture. And I took a look at the actual articles, and it was basically rebranding workplace wellness. And that's when I wrote an editorial for that journal defining it, because I think it's important that we don't mix the two up, because workplace wellness has some limitations that well-being culture doesn't. Now, still want me to answer that question? What's the difference between the two?
I do.
Okay. Sorry, sometimes I tend to give long answers. So workplace wellness is traditionally very transactional. Okay, so I'm the employer and I'm going to ask the employee to do a health assessment. And I'm the employer and I'm going to offer you a webinar. It's like this back and forth relationship. Whereas a well-being culture is not a transaction. It is really a way that we go through the workday. It's the way we experience our workplace. It is like diving into a pool, right? You don't just get a little wet when you dive into a pool, you are wet. And that wetness is all of the things in the workplace that impact our health and well-being. So Jonathan, it's not just about webinars. It's about how you and I as colleagues work together. Are we being nice to each other? Do we help each other laugh? Do we smile at each other? That really helps our well-being. Doesn't matter how many lectures or webinars we go to on nutrition, if I'm not happy, I'm going to possibly reach for that half a gallon of ice cream at the end of the day. And that's going to negate all of the nutrition webinars I attended. Does that make sense?
It does. But for, I'm a very visual person. Like, give us some other examples. And I love it. And I love that description you gave of getting wet, right? Like, just immersive.
All right, Jonathan, who's your favorite sports team?
It would be, from back in the day, Dallas Cowboys.
Okay, the Dallas Cowboys back in the day. Now, the Dallas Cowboys, they are at the center of their own culture, okay? There's a big football culture in the United States, okay? And some of those things about the football culture is, hey, it's Sunday afternoon, I'm sitting down to watch football. But specifically for the Dallas Cowboys, there's some specific culture-related things. So did you have a Dallas Cowboy jersey?
Yes.
Okay, did you have a hat or anything else to wear?
Yes.
Okay, so cultures have costumes, and in healthcare settings, healthcare workers wear scrubs or white jackets. And in sports, people associate that football team maybe with certain foods, okay? I grew up in Buffalo, and so on Sunday when the Bills played, it was chicken wings. And then there are songs, there are colors, and so all of those things collectively make up that culture of the Dallas Cowboys. In the workplace, it's not as colorful as that. It's more around how do people treat each other? What resources are available for each other? Is well-being a priority in the workplace? Do leaders support my well-being? And can I go through my day with the right amount of stress, not too bored and not stressed out because I'm overwhelmed? And are the things that I need to have a healthy day available? Access to healthy foods, the ability to take a 10-minute break to do some mindfulness, the ability to get outside for 10 minutes and breathe fresh air. Those things collectively make up the workplace well-being culture?
So I like where you're going with that, because I feel like, to me, I feel like it's back to the basics. It's kind of like a foundation, where I feel like a lot of it is more of just, we need to bring in vendors, and different vendors who offer wellness solutions will solve our wellness, issues, or the needs of employees, versus what you're saying is an actual culture that's more fundamental than that.
Yeah, fundamentally speaking, we all need a certain level of support. And what I think had happened historically, going back to the 70s, and I applaud Johnson & Johnson, because they're one of the pioneers in this space, and they've done a lot of good. And yet, when you look back in the 70s, the time of Rocky Balboa, played by Sylvester Stallone, was big fitness craze. And so Johnson & Johnson had a Live for Life branded wellness program, and it was heavily focused on physical activity. They offered a gym to the people, and their managers were very supportive, so people felt it was okay to go there. My brother worked for Johnson & Johnson, I think it was in the 80s, and I remember him telling me, hey, if I go to the gym a certain number of times each month, I'm going to get a certain amount of money. And I applaud that. And yet that didn't work for everybody, still doesn't, because not everybody, that's not everybody's priority, Jonathan. We got to get away from, hey, we're doing physical activity, nutrition, sleep. These things don't exist in silos. We got to make sure that we have the basics there about our relationships with the people we work with, feeling the support, feeling like we have the permission, feeling like our day-to-day well-being is being addressed, because it doesn't matter how many miles you go running, if you're still going to be stressed if your workplace isn't supportive of a more decent pace and work relationship setting.
How hard is it for a company to do what you're talking about?
I think when you first look at it, it's kind of hard, because you're basically asking a company to look in the mirror and see, hey, what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong? And I don't mean like, are we making enough widgets fast enough? I mean like, what parts of a well-being culture are we doing right, and where are we falling short? And the only way to know that is to know what a well-being culture is comprised of. Jonathan, I've been subscribing to a framework of 6 well-being culture building blocks for probably 4 or 5 years now, and that we've been using to guide us as we continue to enhance our strategy. You want to hear those building blocks?
Absolutely.
All right. So these are in no particular order. They're all equally important, and they all interact with each other. So if we weren't on a podcast, I'd throw up a slide. That's this diagram with all these building blocks overlapping. So I'm just going to give a real simple definition for each of them. First, leadership engagement. So it's not just leadership, it's not just leadership support, it's leadership engagement. Leaders have to do more than just say, I support this. Second building block is shared values, which are the organizational priorities that support employee health and well-being. So it actually needs to be written into some of the key statements of the organization to be sure that it's not just words, again, that it's being followed up. The social climate is the third building block, and that's how employees feel about being at work with their team. Do they feel like they're part of the team? Is it a positive work environment? Do they feel like they're all working toward the same goal? The fourth is norms. Norms are what a group of people do normally. So for example, in healthcare, we all wash our hands before we go in to see the patient, and we wash our hands when we leave the patient room. And a norm for well-being, well, that could be a norm for well-being because then we don't get an infection. But a more common norm for well-being, let's say in a workplace, would be stopping for a half-hour lunch break and not sitting in front of your computer and working. Fifth building block is something I like to call culture connection points. And these are all the different influences that the influencers that the employer can use to help shape the norms. So I gave you a bunch of examples earlier, like a webinar. A webinar is just one example of a culture connection point. But a standing desk, Jonathan, is not a wellness strategy. It is a tool that I call a culture connection point. Because if an employer gives their employee a standing desk, that makes it much more likely that the person will stand, and that contributes to their well-being. And the sixth building block is peer support. How coworkers interact with each other. Do they support each other or not? And each of these 6 building blocks is just, I could spend an hour on each of them.
It's interesting because to me, it makes so much sense. And I feel like right now, a lot of companies are like, I need to roll out a mental health app, right? Like to offer my employees so they can be in a better place of mind. But everything you're saying to me is going to have a much greater impact on someone's mental health and or happiness than just throwing out an app.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all supportive of mental health, obviously, as well as the other areas like nutrition. And I'm not trying to trash any specific health issue. And yet, just looking at peer support, how we get along with the people around us, if we feel like we've got a friend at work, our mental health is going to be so much more likely to be great than if we feel like we're alone there. And look, a mental health app, again, I'm not dissing apps, but they do have limitations. When we have a friend at work, that person can celebrate when times are good and be very supportive when we're having a mental health problem. And that support can look like a lot of different ways. Now, the employer should not take for granted that the workers are helping each other. The employer can be very intentional on how to foster positive peer relationships, and that will go a long way.
And then is your thought, like, when you have this all in place, if you want to bring in other solutions or things like that, does that sit on top of it, or how does that work?
Yeah, so Jonathan, we are not an IT company. We obviously use a lot of IT, but we are a healthcare delivery system. And so we do partner with LabCorp Employer Services. And through them, they provide some resources. They subcontract to Virgin Pulse for our platform. And yet at the same time, that is not the center of our strategy. That is there to help us house resources and give us some infrastructure for executing on our well-being culture strategy.
I love what you just said, is resources, because I feel like you've defined that in a way that others haven't. You've got this well-being culture, and these things out here are really resources to help you. Where I think a lot of companies are making the mistake of kind of like the resources is the actual solution.
Yeah, I
like they're trying to like work backwards, but it doesn't work backwards.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes it almost feels like, hey, we got this problem, let's give the employees this benefit. Mm-hmm. It's a very quick way to check a box, but it usually doesn't land with something meaningful. It's just, I got to tell you, I have no problems with wellness vendors. In fact, they can be good partners. They can contribute. And yet, we need to be responsible, those who are, helping, the same capacity that I do at Hopkins, we need to be responsible to create the social environment and the physical work environment so that it makes an individual searching for their well-being easier to obtain that. And when they need a resource, that it's there for them to pull when it's needed for them. Too often, we're just trying to push stuff onto employees. And again, Jonathan, everybody knows that an apple keeps the doctor away. We don't have to keep telling them, eat apples.
Well, I'm curious. I've heard a lot of talk in some of our recent roundtables, webinars, even some recent podcasts that, for example, like incentives don't work. It's short term, one time thing, and health risk assessments, don't work. I'm curious as to what your opinion is on that.
Yeah, I'd like to address both. Thanks for raising both. So let me take health risk assessments first. I don't know what it means that they don't work, like this, and what it means if they do work. At its very basic foundation, it's a survey, and the employer is asking a question and the employee's answering it. I don't look at health assessments as a tool that's going to change someone's behavior. We actually offer a health assessment tool. We don't overemphasize it by any means. In fact, it gets very little attention, but we do use the data from it to help us with our planning and our strategy. In fact, we collect a lot of data because it's very helpful in helping us determine our priorities. Without data, it's really hard to know where you're starting, and it's really difficult to know where you're going. Mm-hmm. So I'm a proponent of data and health assessments. I just don't think we should make them mandatory, and I don't think any employer should have any expectation that just because you put a health assessment out there, that all of a sudden your employees are going to be healthy. It just doesn't work that way.
The apple a day thing, right? They're going to go through the health assessment and go, oh, I just need an apple. I just did it now.
Oh yeah. This report says I should be eating an apple. So the second thing you mentioned is incentives, and incentives are really tricky. One of my favorite books is Drive by Daniel Pink, and he talks about what really motivates us. And I suggest anybody who's interested in this area that they pick up his book. Well, I'm a big proponent of supporting internal incentives or internal motivation. So someone wanting to do something because of their own reasons. Like, I want to walk my daughter down the aisle, so I'm going to make sure I eat my oatmeal with fruit every morning. Whereas, employers are offering external motivators and or external incentives. Now, Jonathan, incentives can mean a lot of different things. Now, we do have our leaders show up and participate when we give recognition to, let's say, our top steppers in our fall and spring Race the Globe Steps Challenge. It shows our employees, hey, this is so important to our leaders that they're at that recognition event. That's an incentive. But on the other end of the spectrum, there's money, and there's no doubt that a lot of companies use money. Now, Jonathan, we do have a financial incentive. It's a point-based program, and we use this incentive program for a variety of reasons. And one of the ways we use it is to give us information. We will give points for people to fill out a culture of health survey. So remember those 6 building blocks I just shared with you a couple minutes ago? We're asking our employees, how are we doing in these areas? Because really their experience is so important to us that if we don't have that information, we don't know where we need to focus on. And so I would just caution everybody to, again, over-rely on financial incentives, because there's a lot of limitations to them. If you're using financial incentives, or you're thinking of using financial incentives because you think that someone is going to start eating a lot of apples, you better think twice, because the science doesn't support that. Put your money somewhere else.
As we finish up, any other words of wisdom? I feel like you've shared a lot. And I don't know if there's any more that you have to give, but I think you may.
Yeah, I do, Jonathan. Thank you. This area is a lot about the social sciences. And I think it's important that all human resource departments and managers and people who support health and well-being, like the health promotion community, that they pause and take some time to learn about social science. I would say a lot of people spend time learning about how to read a food label. And again, I think that's important, but I also think that because we're studying what makes us healthy from a physical perspective, we're missing out on these other sciences. I actually think it's a little bit challenging for the average person to probably understand this stuff. And so I have a book coming out in January. It's called A Cure for the Common Company. And Jonathan, I wrote it for HR leaders and managers and the health promotion and health coach community, because it gives a step-by-step plan for how to build these well-being cultures. It's actually, the subtitle is a prescription for a happier, healthier, and more resilient workforce. And it really is a prescription, because if you follow it, and it includes some exercises, it'll lead you on this path. And it's an important path, I think, for everyone to take, because everybody's well-being is important, and the health of the organization rests and depends on the health of the workforce.
It sounds pretty exciting. I feel like to me, I haven't seen a lot of books come out in this area, and ones that are very insightful. And I think that yours, obviously, it sounds like it's going to take a totally unique approach. And I love the fact where you just mentioned the word social, right? Because you never hear people talking about, this is where we need training, this is where we need education. Because, in reality, if you want people to truly engage, you need to understand the science behind behavior and everything, as you're saying, internal, motivators and choices versus external. That's what's going to get movement.
Yeah, that's right. And, just to be clear for our audience today, it's a very readable book. There's stories about how different companies are achieving this, companies that you'll recognize, including Johns Hopkins. And there are call-out boxes with little exercises that you can do with your own work team, so that you can start seeing results pretty quickly.
That's great. That's great. I think being able to have that aspect that you included in the book, I haven't seen that before in any book, which are kind of takeaways to go bring to your own company. That's I assume that has to be very helpful. You said that's coming out this January?
Yeah, Wiley is publishing the book, and it will be released in the middle of January.
Can I or any of my listeners pre-order it now, or do we have to wait to a certain period of time to pre-order it?
Oh, absolutely. I would love to see pre-sales come in. That's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes and Noble, Porchlight, a whole bunch. One of my friends called me and said, "Hey, Rich, your book is on Target." I'm like, Target, like the department store? He's like, yeah. I said, I didn't even know they sold books. He's like, oh yeah, they sell books. So I thought that was pretty fun.
That's pretty cool. And I definitely would recommend anyone, if you've, listened to what Rich said, is it would definitely be worth it to get that book, because it's a totally different perspective. And I think you'll probably, I've had a lot of interaction with Rich and roundtables and webinars and things like that, but I feel like you just bring this perspective that I feel like it's exciting, because it opens up to a new way of thinking and a new way of approaching, which I think people will find very fulfilling, versus just doing the same thing that they've been doing, for years, with really, I feel like, no change, no big impact. It's time to rethink things.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. I think I have something to add, and I hope you will all read the book, and I'm sure you're going to get something out of it. And Target, the department store, is actually featured in the book. There is a story about them as well.
Perfect.
Yep.
Maybe they found that out somehow, and that's why they're like, we've got to go put this.
Yeah,
Got to
that's
sell
what I
it.
was thinking. Right, the artificial intelligence picked it up, and Target's like, okay, we gotta hold this book now.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us, Rich.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. Have a great day.